Now let's get to the recap of this morning's main keynote. Joining us now is Greg Wilson, developer of Cloud Developer Relations. Welcome, Greg.
Hey there.
It's nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, you too.
So let's start.
Today.
Yes. So let's start with the big picture. What would you say was today's main message?
A lot of it's just doubling down on some of the scale that we've had. One thing that struck me today is after 4 years at Google and hearing terms for the first time like petabytes and all, I'm still blown away by the scale. Like there's a comment made about Google Maps having 1 billion active,
It's a crazy
users
number.
I can't even get my head around that.
Yeah.
Talking about BigQuery, mentioned that we have customers, querying 23 trillion rows of data. And I'm old enough to remember when I queried 1 million rows, I thought that was kind of crazy. And if you do the math, that's a tiny, tiny fraction. So like a lot was doubling down on that, like bringing ML to BigQuery, I thought was kind of a huge context shift for a lot of people. It was for me. I think it was for a lot of the folks in the audience. I mean, a lot of people that aren't familiar with BigQuery, they see, they hear about it, they know it's a database that can query 23 trillion rows. But when you start thinking about applying ML to the data that's already in there, that just kind of blows your mind a little bit on what could be accomplished. So that really struck me. One of the other things that really caught my attention was with IoT. Many years I've had friends, I've dabbled a little myself, and I've had friends that were in IoT, and it's always like little pet projects, and they'll have some fun little device doing something. But now when you start looking at like the industrial use of IoT and how it's actually affecting our lives and the possibilities it's bringing, it just feels like it's reaching that point in the technology evolution where it's really about to go crazy, and we're going to see things we can't even imagine today. And so like announcements today I think set us up for that. Like being able to have like edge TPUs, taking that type of incredible hardware power and putting it into a small device out on the edge, and then the software that backs that and the cloud services that backs that, it just makes me think about IoT like very differently than I've ever thought of it before. So that's super exciting. I mean, a lot of us developers have used Google Maps APIs for years. I think it's one of the first Google things I ever touched, way before I ever worked for Google, and it's a lot of fun. You write a little code and a map appears with a dot on it. But gosh, it's come such a long way since then. I mean, people using it in business to make decisions and to track packages, tracking sharks, as she mentioned. All those uses. What's going on in gaming with Maps is mind-blowing to me. I never thought of Maps API as evolving into that type of platform. So I thought that was incredibly cool. That was a surprise to me.
Yeah, it's amazing how there's this huge scale, enterprise scale stuff, but we can still, as developers, we can still play with a lot of it.
Oh yeah, it's all toys to us.
Exactly,
right, yeah.
Exactly. So it's wonderful to see people being enabled, both tinkerers at home and enterprises building real businesses on the same material.
Well, to see all the stuff that we played with and tried to justify playing with it, now it's becoming a real mainstream thing, and now there's this huge demand building up around that stuff. It's kind of vindicating in a way.
Absolutely.
Sounds like we're on the cusp of a wave of possibilities with the kind of technology,
Totally.
as you said. And you mentioned BigQuery, you mentioned IoT. Are there any other products or features that stood out to you?
A lot of the talk around security, I love it that we're really starting to double down on our strength around security.
Right.
One of the things that really struck me when I hired on to Google is Google Cloud is not just Google saying, hey, we should offer this service. Oh, and we should make it secure, by the way, because customers want that. That's not what it is. Like Google has 20 years history building these incredible products that have millions, billions, tens of billions of users. And you think about all the security challenges that we face, some of which we've heard about, some of which I'm sure we haven't, but just all of that experience dealing with security and being baked into our products from the beginning. It's not like we just decided, 3 weeks before we ship, we need to add some security features. A lot of these things have been serving Google for years, way before we made it a public cloud service. So just seeing that really, strengthening. And customers starting to see it. I mean, we're getting traction in that. People are starting to get it. Things like Gmail that we take for granted. You think about some of the statements that were made in yesterday's keynote and today's keynote around the security and the track record we have there. It's impressive. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, and we heard a lot about this in the keynote, was scale. You talked about petabytes of data, billions of rows, all of this sort of stuff. Yeah, it's crazy. Every year we add an extra
billion
zero.
somewhere else.
Right?
Trillions.
I've forgotten how to count that low.
Right. Yeah.
So tell me, when you hear all of that about this scale and about these products, what strikes you as how this sort of is, how this sense of scale affects us at Google?
Well, the one thing about scale, you used to, I'm old enough when I had my first computer that had over a meg of memory, and the whole "I'll never need more than this." My first serious hard drive that my father loaned me money to buy was a 200 meg hard drive. To express that in terabytes requires a lot of zeros after the decimal point. So as much scale as we're talking about, a lot of people may think, I don't need that scale. But when you think about what IoT is bringing and all this new data that's being collected, the amount of data that we're going to create as humans over the next few years is staggering. I mean, if you look at some of the estimations, it's just mind-blowing. So this scale is important. It's going to be important to people that think it's not important today. And not to sound like a marketing guy, but you want to make decisions now that get you in a platform that has proven scalability. Like, we know how to do this. Google's had to deal with it just from rolling out their own products. Some of the challenges we faced behind the scenes way before we decided to get into the public cloud business, just building a map system that can handle the billion users a day, handling Gmail, which who knows how many millions of emails have gone through since we've started this conversation. Right. The tech that goes into that scale is super impressive, and I think it puts us ahead of everyone else, quite honestly.
Yeah, it's all very impressive. I mean, you talked about how we're really baking our internal strategies into our products.
Yeah.
How else do you think threading this approach into our cloud strategy is going to really shape the future of our cloud?
Well, I think we're getting to the point now where we're not just learning from our own things with scale and security, but we're starting to learn from customers. It used to be, here's the technology all of our stuff runs on, and we learn day to day as we grow, but now we have like some major customers bringing different types of use cases that we've never imagined to our platform. And so what I'm excited about over the next few years is seeing where all that leads. Like what IoT demos are going to be showed next year. I mean, we saw an incredible one today with like Chevron and some others, but like, what are we going to see 3 years from now as the demo? And I think it really positions us well. The security requirements that we're going to need in the world to get smarter, on both sides. And with every new technology, there's always, new attempts to exploit that. And I think Google has a good track history of doing that. So I think it's our ability to adapt and learn from our customers. And I think that's what's exciting about it.
So I think the thing which kind of I was most excited about, and I think I'm probably not alone in this in the keynote, was with all the cool stuff around IoT. Yeah. So can you give us a summary of like what's cool, what's new happening around the IoT world?
Yeah. Well, it's the scale of IoT, really. IoT is more than Raspberry Pi or some little gimmicky thing that you do that we've all built and had a lot of fun doing. It's thinking about putting sensors in industrial complexes where you have thousands of sensors creating a ton of data. That all sounds easy until you get down to really how do I implement that? Well, you have to be provisioning every one of those sensors and tracking them and knowing how to handle the data, where to store the data, how to analyze the data. And so you look at like Cloud IoT Core, the things that we announced today around moving some of that technology out on the edge, where it's handled, basically TensorFlow Lite running on the edge using some specialized hardware out on the edge, and then being able to take care of a lot of the ML aspects of it, and then all the cloud services that go behind that, the provisioning and all the configuration technology that goes behind it. So that's what I was saying earlier. It makes you think of IoT in a whole different light. It's not a toy anymore. Yeah. It's still a toy, but it's not a toy.
It's
anymore.
Also a toy.
Yeah, it's also like everything else we touch.
Mutually exclusive.
Right. Yeah, everything we do is a toy to us. I mean, it's fun stuff, but to see it being used in some of these real-world applications, like life-changing, seriously human-affecting implementations, that's super exciting. And today we're just seeing the hints of it. Some cool announcements today. I think it sets us up for some amazing future. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Greg. We really appreciate you taking the time, giving us your insights. Yep.
I appreciate it. Thank you.